which is in fact the windmill under repair. I'm sure Charlotte's going to explain all that to us. Her duties, I gather, are to coordinate between the actual trust and the people who run it and get things going. Particularly, I'd be interested in the new centre you've got, which all been built with lottery money. But she'll tell us all about that. So, Charlotte, that's all your
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So thank you for welcoming me here today. As Brian introduced me, I am Charlotte Coombs, and I'm Community and Engagement Officer at Upminster Windmill. I do apologise now, I've got a little bit of a cold, so I sound quite groggy in my mind, and I'm a bit worried that might sound groggy as well, so I apologise for now. So Upminster Windmill, as you well know, is going for a restoration project, but I thought first of all I'd have a show of hands who has heard of Upminster Windmill. Show of hands, keep those hands up if you have visited Upminster Windmill. And hands up if you're going to visit Upminster Windmill when it's fully restored. Everyone's hands should be up, at least the Vista Center you can visit. So Upminster Windmill was built in 1803 and it was a working windmill for most of its life. It stopped producing flour in 1934, so for the latter part of its life it has been a visitor attraction. So I'm going to just talk just briefly a little about the history and then go on to the restoration project more in detail. So it was built by a man called James Noakes, and James Noakes was a businessman in Upminster. He was originally from Grays and he came to Upminster to build a windmill. And a windmill was needed because in the French Revolutionary Wars, Britain was included, and there was inflation on imported goods, so the cost of importing grain was really expensive. So that was the need to have a windmill. And it was also to populate the expanding London as well. So James Noakes built Upminster Windmill, and from there it fell into the hands of the Abraham family. And the Abraham family owned the windmill for 74 years. And Alfred Abraham was the last miller, and he sold the windmill in 1934. And through that it passed through a few hands, and in, I think it was William Wobson, he wanted to demolish Upminster Windmill, and that was around late 1800s, and he wanted to demolish the windmill. And there was a public outcry in Upminster to say they wanted to save the windmill. So in 1901, not 1901, 1938, there was a preservation order put on Upminster Windmill that nobody could destroy it. In 1901 there was a storm, and that was while Alfred Abraham was the last miller, and it wasn't worthwhile replacing the sails because windmill, it wasn't producing flour anymore, it was producing animal feed. Trade was diminishing, so it was being replaced by roller mills and other kind of factories. But the public of Upminster said, no, this is our iconic landmark, as you probably well know. You can see images of Upminster Windmill throughout Havering. I mean, I went into an estate agent the other day and I saw Upminster Windmill there. I saw it on a film, but you see it all over, and it's just an iconic landmark. And it was even back then. So the local people, they decided to fund the sails to be replaced. Also, since Alfred Abraham sold the windmill, it has been managed by volunteers. It's been owned by London Borough of Havering, but it has been volunteers that have been integral to keeping Upminster Windmill intact. Also, on a significance level, Havering used to have many windmills. There used to be one in Romford, where the Goose Pub is, which is by the train station. There also used to be one in Hornchurch. I believe it was by St Andrew's Church.
Still.
Oh, good. People are nodding, which is good. So there was quite a few windmills. And obviously this is the only windmill that survived in Havering. And it's also only one of 4 windmills that have survived in London. Does anyone know the other windmills? Not Brian, because I'm sure he knows what they are. Does anyone know the other windmills in London?
Wimbledon.
Wimbledon windmill, yeah. Any others?
Mill Hill?
No? So we've got Brixton Windmill, Wimbledon Windmill, and, can't say windmill, and Shirley Windmill, which is in Croydon. So there used to be thousands of windmills and only 4 remain. So that is why Upminster Windmill is very important. So I'm going to talk about the restoration project. So it was managed through a partnership. As I mentioned, the London Borough of Havering owned the windmill. yet it's run by a charitable group called the Friends of Outminster Windmill. And they worked together and applied for funding from Heritage Lottery Fund. So it's funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund and from Veolia North Thames Trust. And that was to restore the windmill's working order. So this was the windmill as you knew it. It doesn't look that bad to the eye, my naive eye, it just looks like it needs a little bit of paint. But that's what it looked like inside, part of it. So it was registered as in poor condition on the Historic England Heritage at Risk Register. And as you can see from the image there, the fabric was deteriorating, some of the sections were unsafe, and the internal machinery wasn't working. So it hasn't been producing flour since 1934. So there are three main features of the restoration. One is to restore the windmill to work in order, so that it can produce flour and we can demonstrate this to the public. Another one is to build a new visitor and education centre where we can inform people more about the windmill and the family associated with it, the Abraham family. And in addition to that, an education programme. So I'm going to explain a bit about each point. So first of all, the restoration contract. So the mill is being restored by a Dutch millwright named Willem Dijkstra, and that is pictured there. So obviously Holland, as you may well know, are famous for windmills, so where else to go to fix our windmill? So this is his workshop, and his workshop is gigantic, and you can see from some of these pictures I'll show you later, the amount of work that goes into restoring a windmill is extensive. So the first job that was to be done was to remove the cap and sails, and this was done in 2015, and it's a lovely image actually of the cap and sails being removed. And a spoiler alert, they didn't fall, they were fine, they were nestled safely onto the ground. And it took about half an hour to get them from the top onto the ground. And it was a very planned project to get it down, only though it took half an hour, and it was the crane operators and the millwright who were intrinsic in getting it down. So the restoration work on the cap and sails are being done in Holland at the moment. So this is just an aerial view of what the windmill looks like without the cap. And that is inside Willem's workshop in Holland. So you can see it's quite a large space. This image here is just showing how they're measuring the curve. And also, as I said, the work that a millwright does is quite extensive. It isn't just carpentry. You can see here, like, you've got the rollers, so it's metal work as well. It's quite an in-depth job. And in Britain, I think we have only about 12 millwrights. And we're fortunate enough that one of the volunteers who volunteers at Upminster Windmill is a trained millwright, but he hasn't got the workshop like Willem does in Holland. But he is training volunteers on how to maintain the machinery. So if things happen in the future, we can self-maintain our windmill. So, as I said, that was one of the jobs that the volunteers have been doing. They've been removing the internal machinery, and that is the jobs that they've been restoring in our new workshop in the Vista Center, but I'll talk a bit more about that later. So after the cap and sails were removed, it meant that we could do more work on the main structure. And as you can see from this image, we have the roofing gallery on the outside, and that's what's missing on the other image. So that was the next part. And then with the structural work, we had to do some essential strengthening work. So you can see here from the images, you've got the old timber and the new timber. So what we wanted to do with this restoration project was keep as much of the original windmill intact. So where we could, try and use the original timbers, but obviously, as you saw from the initial image, some of it was decaying, so we had to get rid of part of it. So I think it looks quite nice, it looks quite subtly done, I think. But as you can see, that was where the roofing galleries would have come through. And just to think that the bit that's been replaced is the bit that was actually supported in the wall. So it's a bit dangerous and quite nice to think that it's done now. Nothing happened at that time. And these are just more images of kind of mixing the old wood and the original wood with the new wood. That's quite a nice little image. So the next job after that was to remove the weatherboarding. So this is what our windmill looks like now. Not a very nice state. So we've got a polythene cap, a wrap around it, and that's just to keep it safe from the elements, from bad weather. So what we had to do then was to remove the weatherboarding. And the weatherboarding was the white wood that surrounds the outside of the windmill. Because we assessed the damage to the timbers, the structural timbers, from the inside, but we had to do it from the outside. And this was the job that I think everyone was biting their nails about, because that would really show the true damage of Upminster Windmill. And unfortunately, it was a bit more damage than what we anticipated. So unfortunately, our project has been delayed because we didn't anticipate as much damage. So the scaffolding will be in place for about 1.5 years whilst all this work is going on. And that's what it looks like inside. So I think it looks a little bit like the Crystal Maze, like the little dome. But you can see all the weatherboard has been removed, but I like the fact they've kept the windows as well, just so you can see out. So they've removed all the weatherboarding, so you can see the timber from the outside, and that's how we've been able to assess the damage. And that's just another image as well. So you can see all the way through the floors. And that's really what it looks like. That's just a kind of digital image, of what it looks like down to its bare bone structure. So we've got 8 corner posts as such, and I think initially we only thought that 1 may need replacing, and I think it's about 4 or 5 that need replacing. So quite an extensive amount of work needs to be done. So after we assess the damage, the next job was to lift the tower. So the tower comprises of the brick base and the wooden tower, which is rested on the brick base. From that, what they did was they lifted up the whole of the windmill, and they raised it 2 inches, which it looks quite, I think it looks quite precarious there, just on a little kind of block. And they did that to remove the concrete sill. And the concrete sill covered the top of the brickwork and was underneath the wood. And that was added in 1949. And we know this because we saw an inscription of David Lewis and Philip Leonard. They wrote their names, they graffitied on our windmill. So the concrete sill was only added as a temporary fixture. It's not meant to last. But obviously 1949 is still here. It's not a very good temporary fixture. So our aim was to remove that and replace that with 2 courses of brick and then a wooden panel. So that is what the millwright is working on right now. So the millwright, as I said, has got his workshop in Holland. So 1 week he's here working on the windmill, and at the moment he's been doing the brickwork. And when he goes back to Holland, he's working on the capping sails and the other structural work. So the timetable, as I said, we were hoping that Upminster Windmill will be ready for summer this year. But unfortunately, where we assessed the damage when we took the weatherboarding off, it's looking like it's going to be winter this next year. Obviously, if you've seen Upminster Windmill or gone past the site, you know it might look a bit like a building site. So obviously, the groundworks around the area need to be maintained and landscaped. So it's hoped that in spring 2019, Upminster Windmill will be open for business. The other part of the restoration project is the Vista Center. A new building was built, and the structure was completed last summer. And there you'll be able to learn more about Upminster Windmill and the family, the Abraham family. It was opened this year only for a select dates, and next year it'll be open for a select weekends as well, from April to October. It's currently being used regularly for venue hire, and it also contains a fully equipped workshop. And this is an image of the workshop, so this image here. Doesn't look the tidiest. But this workshop is to help us become more sustainable. So as I said, in Holland they're synonymous for windmills, and that's why we had to go over there. But this is a one-of-a-kind workshop that we have at Upminster Windmill, so that if something goes wrong with our machinery, we don't have to go to Holland, we can do it in-house. Which is also good because pictured to the right is a set of sails. They're not from Upminster Windmill, they're from Paston Windmill, and that's in Norfolk. So we've been doing work on those sails, restoring them in our workshop. So other people, other windmills won't have to go abroad. We can help them as well, keep it in-house, which is nice. Education programme. This is partly what I'm involved with. I'm funded through Heritage Lottery Fund, and my work is community and engagement. So part of the work that was done before I started was archaeology. So when Upminster Windmill was built, it had more than just a windmill. It had a miller's house, which is where the miller and his family lived. It had a steam engine, it had workers' cottages, it had loads of different outbuildings, and these were demolished in the 1960s. And this is the site of the miller's house, which is where the new Vista Center is based on. And All of these sites were excavated, and that's enabled us to learn a bit more about the history about the site and of the people that used to live there. And some of the finds that we excavated from the digs are on display in our Vista Center as well. Through this education programme, we've had a lot of photographic material donated to us, and we've had a lot of photographs that we have been restoring. So this is a picture of Florence Abraham, and she was Sydney Abraham's daughter, and they used to have a baker's on Station Road. Again, digital images and models. So the images here and here, these are models at the top, and this is a digital image. This has all been done by works of volunteers. So at Upminster Windmill, we've got a diverse group of volunteers with skills that can reproduce digital images of what Upminster Windmill would have looked like in the past. Because as I said, there used to be so many outbuildings. That used to be the miller's house, that back was the steam engine, workers' cottages. So it's nice for people to kind of get a visual idea of what it might have looked like in the past. Miller's Scissors, this is a sewing and craft group that was set up, and that was to kind of showcase the different groups of people, and it was to show smocking. This image is of a smock, and smocking is the type of sewing. If anyone's keen at sewing, you can join Miller's Scissors if you want to. So we've just been creating smocks, and that's what agricultural workers would have worn in the late 17th century. So it's just showcasing what Upminster Windmill would have been like in the past. And community engagement. So I work with schools, and I get them to come in and learn a bit about Upminster Windmill, its place in local history. And the picture below is from Upminster Junior School. They then took the workshop to the classroom and were creating their own types of windmills. Open days, so as I said, from April to October next year will be open for select weekends to inform you all about the developments of the restoration project and of the history of the site. Volunteering as well, so we've had new volunteering opportunities. We're having the new Vista Center, means we've been recruiting more Vista Center guides, retail assistants, and with the Miller's Scissors sewing group as well. And themed events will be putting on. When the windmill's open, obviously we'll be having tours of the windmill as well. And finally, just in case anyone is interested, volunteering opportunities. This area here by the Vista Center has all been landscaped by volunteers. This hasn't been done by the council. As I said, we're working in partnership with them, but the volunteers have been intrinsic of developing the site. So we've got gardening volunteers, and we have retail assistants, Vista Center guys, and Miller's Scissors. So if you are interested in volunteering, do talk to me afterwards. And also Friends membership. We're encouraging people to become members of the Friends, because money we raise goes back into restoring our windmill and also in putting on events for the local community. So thank you very much for listening. It was a short kind of run through the restoration project, but does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Thank you. I'm interested, why is there a steam engine on the site? The windmill powers its own stones. What was the steam engine for?
So the steam engine was built in 1811, and that was just used as an additional source of power, because where they had the grain was in, the prices of grain had, I can't talk properly. Where, as I mentioned before, they had the French Revolutionary Wars, and the cost of grain that was imported was very high, so it made economic sense to have it in the UK. So it immediately became profitable, but obviously the windmill was reliant on wind.
Okay.
So it was just used as an additional source of power alongside the windmill. And along with that, you can't see it now, but there used to be, they dug out a water channel to a local spring that connected it to the steam engine, and all that's left there now is a mill because it was filled up. But it was just used as an additional source of power.
When was it taken out?
It was demolished in 1960.
The steam engine?
The steam engine. So all the outbuildings, I might actually have an image, because I was going to cut down this presentation. But as I said, there were loads of different outbuildings, and again it was another public outcry that saved it. So this is the image of the demolition. So you can see the kind of boiler shell just on the bottom.
Yes.
So there. So all the outbuildings were demolished in the 1960s, and it's just because Upminster Windmill was Grade 2 listed and the public outcry that got that preservation order was the only reason that it was saved. So that's why we wanted to restore it because everyone loves the windmill, hopefully.
My recollection is that the windmill has another claim to fame.
Okay.
In the great storms that we had, when was it, 87?
87.
87. It was one of the few windmills that was actually not damaged in any sense, because it was so well built. And it was actually able, I think, to turn itself into the wind.
Yeah, so
others were damaged, but that one wasn't.
Yeah, so the windmill, on the top, that's the cap and sails. And the cap and sails are what rotate and face the wind. So yeah, it's right, so it would have faced the wind. It is quite difficult because in stormy weather, you'd think, oh, that's great, I'm going to grind lots of grains of flour. That was me being naive because I didn't know anything about windmills before I started. But it's not, it's very difficult, so it's kind of adjusting the sails. So, but no, it was, it did have damage in 1901, and I think in 2007, but I think the one you're on about, there wasn't any damage. But.
If you're renovating other people's sails, why didn't you renovate your own rather than send them to Holland?
Because part of our restoration project was to build the Vista Center, so we never had the Vista Center before. So what we wanted to do was to ensure that we didn't have to spend more money to go abroad to fix our windmills. We wanted to make sure we had a workshop that was built in the new Vista Center. And the workshop is built so that it can fit a sail in it, so it's quite a large space. So it was just and as well, it's an additional source of income. I think, as you know, places have to be self-sustaining now, and as I said, it's owned by London Borough of Haven, but managed by a charitable group. So in order for them to make money or to be more self-sustaining, it all worked out ideal to have a workshop included in the restoration project. So we're quite lucky and quite fortunate to have that funding to be able to build that.
Is there a connection between the windmill and the Tide Farm?
There's not.
No,
There's
I
not.
understood what there was. But
Not that I found out, because I thought initially that the Tide Farm, the name of Tide Farm is quite deceiving, because tithe actually means in Old English a tenth, and you used to have, in medieval England, you used to have to pay a tenth of your earnings to the local church. And in that time in Upminster, it would have been St Lawrence's Church. So when I started working there, I thought, oh, the Tide Farm, that's linked to St Lawrence's Church. But no, St Lawrence's Church had their own tithe barn on site. They just called it a tithe barn, just to confuse me. And
I thought it was always tied to Waltham Abbey. Yes.
Oh, very possibly that's it. As I said, I thought it would have been to the 10th of England, but...
I've just read a book on the history of Upminster, the latest one published, which came from Swans. And in fact, the tithe barn in the book is considered to be, I use the word loosely, fraudulent. Nobody actually is clear on its history.
No.
Nobody. It seems there is no history on it. Goes back to 1400 from memory. But what we're talking about, what we knew as tithes, is actually not correct in its history.
Sorry, at the back of the dog club, which is next door, there's a large bell on the roof, which I understood was rung by the monks when the tithes were due.
Oh, so it might have been from the Waltham Abbey. Oh, okay. I'll have to
I don't know where I
research
got
that.
that from, but that's...
Oh, I'll have to look that up, because I would have thought it would have been linked to St Lawrence's Church, because that was the established church in the past, but it may well be, because Waltham Abbey was...
a long way away.
Yeah. But yeah, well, thank you very much for listening to me today, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very
Council owns them
much
both.
for giving the explanation in quite depth. And because of Upminster Windmill, I think there's a lot of interest, because you know you live in Upminster. And hopefully, when it's restored in September 18th, we'll possibly make a visit as a group of the parents.
Yeah, I'd love to see you all there. Well, thanks very much.
Fellows, please show your George, Vista Center.
Yes, members, if you weren't here last week, or if you were here last week and ignored my little speech last week, I am collecting the £5. It's not voluntary. For your greetings. As far as I know, the only one I've got to make up a new one. I've got 3 new ones.
Jamie?
Jamie, Oscar and
Gillian.
Well, they'll come under one. Joe did his last year. So we've got 2 more to go, but everybody's got to pay. And I will collect after Christmas if needs be. So if you're a bit short this side of Christmas, don't worry about it. I'll get it. So if you want to pay, I'm here. Thank you very much. £5.
Thank you, George. Thank you.
Just a quick, does everybody know where to meet tomorrow night?
No,
You don't?
no, where do we need?
Over to the
Yeah. I was going to put an email out, but we traditionally used to meet in Bertha Road, but after the unfortunate incidents of
Yes.
parking fines last year,
Yes.
I think it'd be better. Parkston Avenue seems to be the best bet. Just at the end there's no problems about parking a little bit up from the junction, so Parkston might be a better bet for parking when you go to meet us, all right?
Yes, I got caught last week.
No, you didn't, yeah. But he told me, so we got it.
Oh, no, good, good.
I just did the reference now. Sorry, no. 191.
Friday.
Voucher.
First half of me.
You haven't got one, Mr. Griffin. Oh, I can't get one. What's that? You've got a
191.
No, to give them.
No?
Must be there somewhere.
Somewhere.
I didn't get one.
Yeah, that's me.
Oh, he's got a certificate.
I've done it.
I'll do it again. 199. 199.
Yeah.
Collection. Yeah. Spend your Christmas shopping in the pharmacy. Go to Bobani's and get all your gifts.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
All from 10.
Is there any other business? Anybody wants to say anything? Charles has given us a few more minutes. Thank you. Anybody wants to say anything? No. Even Norman doesn't want to say anything. No.
Just in case if anybody's interested, first step have a monthly coffee morning, and this month it will be tomorrow. And they've got some sort of choir, I can't remember the name, a group coming to sing and whatever. It's always a good time. So it's 10 o'clock till 12 o'clock tomorrow at their own headquarters in Winchester.
Yes, first step.
You say this, but the magazine I've given out, the Rotary one, they will send us a few extra copies. If anybody would like spares to put in their workplaces, surgeries, waiting rooms and so forth, then please collect.
George again.
Yes, as Mr. President, as the trees, Christmas trees were mentioned, I know several of us went along to have a look at them. I thought our Rotary one was really good. Got my vote.
Yeah. Of course it is.
But the actual trees themselves are really lovely. I think it was a splendid event.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, perhaps we'll do it again next week. Yeah. Anything else?
We're up to 7. Is there any advance on 7? Can we do 8? No?
Welcome on the night.
Well, yeah, you're welcome to come on the night.
6 o'clock, there we go.
That's 7 people. Yeah, right.
Christmas will be there.
Thank you.
Right of journals, please be upstanding for the final clause.